I think it is taking a deep and honest and loving look at all of the dimensions of what it means to be a human being.
Mm.
I think in the wellness industry that we've both been in for a long time, there can be specialists and deep emphasis on nutrition, on diet, on movement, on spirituality, on mental health, on therapy, on trauma work. It can almost feel a little overwhelming at sometimes when you think about the totality of all of the things that make us a human being.
Hey. All right, we are doing this with Jason Wrobel. How are you, Jason?
I'm feeling good today, Ella. It's always good to see you.
It's so good to see your face. Last time I saw you was in LA, right?
Yes, and we had our faces in plates of food, talking about personal growth and healing and our family histories. It was what I thought was going to be like a light brunch got really deep really fast. And that's one thing I love about interacting with you and talking to you is it's never a surface level conversation. We go deep all the time.
It is, and it's become like the new norm for me. And when I connect with somebody who's kind of on that plane, it's so exciting. Like to be able to speak this language that's I mean, honestly relatively new for me. A lot of this healing work started just in the last couple years, and then this year has been very intense. And I know it seems like we have a lot of parallels going on in our lives.
Yeah, it's boy oh boy, it reminds me of a quote from one of my favorite authors and mythologians, Joseph Campbell, who a lot of people know as the hero's journey, which was the blueprint for the Star Wars series and the blueprint really for a lot of ancient mythologies. But Joseph Campbell has a great quote, and he said, it is when life seems most challenging that we have the opportunity to explore our deeper powers.
Mm, it's so true.
Yeah. Yeah, when life's easy, not to say that it's not pleasurable when it's easy. I mean, I could use a little more ease right now. Universe, I could use a little more ease. But it seems to me, when things are easy and we're on a beach in Hawaii and we've got our coconut water and we're feeling good and we're feeling ourselves, there's not necessarily a lot of growth in those moments. But when life really sticks it to us, as you and I and probably many, many of your listeners can relate to, it's an opportunity to see what those deeper layers and those deeper superpowers are. Right. And it makes me think of those mythologies or our modern day Marvel tales or our DC superheroes, right?
Mm.
They're deeper powers of not only physical strength, but mental and spiritual strength only come because of the trials and tribulations that have been put on their doorstep. I mean, how boring would a superhero movie be if it's like, Superman's taking a vacation in the Maldives with Lois Lane? Boring movie. Boring movie.
Nobody's watching that one.
No.
No, that's so interesting you said that, because when I had decided, and it was less of a decision and more like it just had to happen when I decided to go to Peru. And I know you've had your own spiritual journeys this year alone, but when I decided to go to Peru and to the Temple of the Way of Light, and with thanks to Gabor Mate's testimonial, that kind of put me over the edge and said, this is my trip to go on, literally. And they have you kind of do a preparation about your own hero's journey and start to prepare there. Um, and and wow, yeah, I wouldn't have gone there if I wasn't experiencing such ooh, intense confusion, exhaustion, challenges, trials, tribulations, all of that this year. And I know you've been going through a lot of that as well.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought up Gabor Mate, because another thing you and I connected with is his work. And I'm almost done right now with his book, The Myth of Normal.
Mm.
And he talks a lot about trauma, of course. That's what one of the things he's known for, but he also talks about suffering into truth.
Mm.
And this idea that oftentimes we don't wake up and we don't see the truth of our existence or the truth of what needs to be healed unless we go through sometimes some intense suffering. And we could get into maybe the existential ramifications of why do we need to suffer as humans to see truth or to wake up to a certain level of reality. But when I read that about this concept of we suffer into truth, man, when I read that, it resonated so deeply for me of just reflecting on my own trauma, my own suffering from my life. And in those moments feeling, and I know you can relate to this, I don't know how I'm going to make it through this moment. I don't know literally how I'm going to survive this situation. But somehow, on the other side of those moments, those trials and tribulations, those challenges, I would not, and it's cliche to say this, I would not be the person who I am if I had not gone through those things. And so hopefully what I'm saying is maybe in the midst of challenge, pain, suffering, loss, to discover some gratitude in it. It might take a long time to discover that gratitude, but the gratitude for the growth that results, I think, is such an important part of that process.
Yeah, and I think the more we reflect back and realize that about our past situations, the more we can start to recognize it while it's happening, when it's very challenging to recognize it. And tip, I would not tell somebody else as they're intensely suffering, oh, you're going to be so grateful for this. Not the time. Just little tips. So speaking of trauma, and can we talk a little bit about your background for those of you who are unfamiliar, your personal story? Kind of, I know that's big, but wherever you feel like it would be good to start and tell us a little bit about your background.
Yeah, I feel like this answer changes every single time I get asked. I don't have like a script. I just kind of lead off where I think is the most appropriate. I was born in Detroit, Michigan, in the 70s to a very blue collar, hardworking family, raised by a single mom who was working 3 jobs at a time. And dad was in and out when I was younger. And if we're talking about trauma and healing, that my childhood was ripe with a lot of fruit, let me say it in a positive way, for me to unpack later in my life. And, growing up in a really hardworking, kind of put your nose to the grindstone, blue collar family, plus an absentee dad, it really created this framework that I didn't have any language for or understanding of until probably my 30s of, oh, that's why you work so hard and grind yourself into the ground to be the best at everything, because A, that was the work ethic in your family growing up, and B, you were trying to get the love from your father that you never got by being the best at, being a TV host, being a chef, in my teens and 20s, being an athlete, being an author, whatever I put my mind and my heart to. I had this almost psychotic obsession with being the best at it. And I didn't understand why I felt that way until many years later. So, growing up, again, we keep going back to Gabor Mate. I think I had this somewhat rosy sort of picture that I would paint for people for many years of my upbringing. But when I really got into the mechanics of the familial dynamics I grew up with, Ella, it was like, wow, there's a lot of healing that needs to happen here that I never realized. All of that is to say, I grew up loving animals, being in Detroit, growing up with a love for cars and motorcycles, playing basketball from a young age, being what I think was a very gifted writer and actor, and always had a love for food and learning food and making food. So I think my upbringing really resulted in this interesting collage or pastiche of passions and activities that it's been a challenge for me to stick with one thing in my adult life because I have so many interests and so many desires and so many passions. But to me, I think if I could get down to the core of it, maybe it's I want whatever my art or my expression or my creativity that I leverage in the world and put out into the world to have some sort of dynamic of healing or inspiration or joy or awareness. Like I've always just had this idea that whatever I create or whatever I put my heart into, I don't want it just to be for me. I want it to be that maybe, of course, we have no control over this, that it could provide some hope, healing, inspiration, perspective to others. And I think no matter what I do, that's always sort of a a top coat of paint that's over the piece of art, is
Mm.
just wanting to give something good to other people.
Mm. I love that. And I'm curious, one question that popped up, because you're interested in so many things and you've done so many different things, your identity as a human being, how has that changed over the years? What if I said, who are you, Jason, now? And how has that changed? And I was interesting. I was just having a panel discussion and on grief and loss, and over animals, from both a collective as vegans and individual, like companion animal loss, which I've experienced this year. And it was like, we've got to, as vegans, have another identity other than being vegan if we're going to stay sane in this world, right? So that's, I think that's where my question is was based in.
It's a challenging question. You're asking a very deep and existential query, because I think in the past, if you would have asked me, "Who are you, Jason?" I would have given you an answer like, "Oh, I'm a vegan chef and a cookbook author and a TV host. I'm Puerto Rican and Spanish and Polish and Italian and Ashkenazi Jew, and uh, I'm heterosexual and a liberal." And I would have given you a combination of identifying phrases that I suppose summarize the character I'm playing in the world.
Mm-hmm.
But I often sit and think, well, Jason is a construct. Jason Andrew Wrobel is a construct. It's a name that I was given at birth. And through conditioning, through adaptation, through trauma, through imprinting, through culture, through society, through my family, I've created a system of programs that I run on, right? I really do feel like our brain is an electrical, emotive supercomputer. And so is Jason, the idea of Jason, just a collection of programs and systems and inputs and conditioning? Is Jason just um, a symbiotic patchwork of intelligent bacteria and a microbiome and gut brain access? I mean, I don't really have a succinct answer anymore, Ella. I don't. And when I say that, sometimes that feels very liberating to tell you that I don't know how to describe myself anymore. And at other times it's terrifying to admit that, because this idea, when we go to parties or we meet new people or we go out on a date, which has been horrifically unsuccessful for me lately, that's a whole nother subject. What do we usually lead with? Someone says, "Oh, what do you do?" Not what are you passionate about? What is your heartbeat for? Um, what do you feel your purpose is on planet Earth as a human being? It's what do you do? And to decondition myself from that knee-jerk answer of, I'm a podcast host and an author and a bestseller, blah, blah, blah. Like, look at me. I realize that in many ways, that's sort of this social conditioning of, in my opinion, hey, value me because I'm important. I've done things. And maybe if you acknowledge the value that I'm espousing to you based on my titles and accomplishments and social standing, you'll think I'm an important, worthy person of love, of attention, of affection. So for me to say, I don't really know how to summarize who I am or what I'm doing anymore. I've gotten some interesting reactions from people. They're like, "Well, what do you mean? What are you up to?" I'm like, I'm basically, my answer now is some version of, I am trying to find out who the authentic version of my being is. And that's a bit woo-woo, maybe. Like, well, authentic version of your being. Yeah, like, who am I in my essence, without titles, without accomplishments, without any sort of manipulative coercion to get you to like me or love me or approve of me? Like, at the core of my essence, who am I? That's a very complicated question, and it's not an easy one to answer. And maybe the answer changes all the time, and that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's not about arriving at some conclusive answer of like, this is what I am until the end of time. I mean, I think we're all ever evolving, ever growing, ever transforming beings. So I'm not sure there ever is a succinct final answer to that question.
Good answer. Oh my gosh, I can so relate. We were talking about this too, I think at lunch in LA, when I was saying this year has been so intense, and that I'm in that stage where, the caterpillar is in the cocoon and it's no longer caterpillar, yet it's not yet a butterfly. So what the hell is it? Like, who the hell am I? And I think that what you just said is actually very comforting in a sense, in that you don't there doesn't necessarily have to be a definition. And to get to butterfly stage, that's kind of like, oh, I'm seeking this arrival. And maybe it's the clinging on to that idea that I need to arrive somewhere to be complete. Maybe that's part of where the suffering comes in. Just
the desire for completion.
Or arrival at a place that I'm trying to get to. I don't know.
Well, I think this maybe goes into some of the overly simplistic and pedantic language that we use around the concept of something like a midlife crisis, which if we think about, what do we think about when the common language or imagery we get around a midlife crisis is what? For guys, it's like, I'm going to go buy the expensive sports car, or get the hair plugs, or I don't even know what, I don't know, get a penis implant. I don't know what the hell they do. I don't know. Like typical, like external material things of, I'm going to feel, and there's nothing wrong with those things. I want to say that, like, go buy the Corvette, do whatever makes you feel good. But I think often it's not addressing the spiritual wake-up call at this stage of life, like early, mid, late 40s, kind of the typical framework of a quote midlife crisis. But to me, I think it invites, for me right now, as I am in my mid 40s, a deeper examination of, have I been living a life that is true to me? Am I really focusing on things that really bring deep joy and contentment and fulfillment? Or has it all been a ruse or a manipulation of sorts, again, to go back to fulfilling these sort of what I call them, like the four dual basic urges. On one side, we want attention, significance, respect, and fulfillment, right? And on the other side, we have being ignored, or being disrespected, or feeling unimportant, or being unfulfilled. So I think with this framework, it's like, we chase the things on the one side, the gain side. I want to be respected and adored and fulfilled and feel important. And we try to avoid at all costs being ignored, feeling unimportant, feeling like we're not relevant. And I think most human behavior is sort of governed by trying to get the gain side and avoid the loss side. But for me, this awakening is like, I had thought, I'm going to go buy a new Mustang or buy a new Corvette. Yeah, that'll feel good. But I know that literally a week later after I do that, will that change my perception of my being? No. Will it give me the kind of attention, love, significance, importance that I actually desire? Not really. So this idea of examining who we are, this question of who am I and what is really important, what really matters. There's certainly a ton of distractions in our society that we can succumb to, of materialism and addiction, and there's just a million distractions to take us away from this inner inquiry and examination that I think for all humans, if we were to sit with the discomfort of, I don't know who I am, I don't know what I'm doing, and I don't know what matters anymore. Let's try to not run from that pain, because it is painful to sit in those questions.
Yeah.
Especially when, for me, one of the biggest arrows is, oh, well, you thought by 45 you'd have a wife and the nice car and the big house on the Venice canals and be an Emmy award winning TV host and all whatever the hell, again, externalized material things that I thought by age 45 this would be my life, and none of those things came to fruition. So if that dream is dead, and that dream maybe was never even who I was in the first place, well, what is the new dream? And here's another layer to it. Do I even need to have dreams anymore? Do I? Like, this is a whole nother question, Ella, of like, our culture's like, you got to dream big and don't let go of your dreams and dream big. Okay. However, how do we find the balance between staying present in the moment, right here, right now, and thinking toward the future without being attached to the outcome? That's really hard. That's really hard to do.
And it's complex to even try to consider, right? Like it's, and I think this is a really valuable conversation to have for a lot of our audience too, who's, the entrepreneurs and professionals who have worked really freaking hard for a very long time, who have achieved a lot of things in their lives and have a lot of accolades like yourself, and still there's something missing, something incomplete, and trying to fill that up with material things is not working. And so this is valuable. And I think getting to that place, and this is what I'm telling my client that I'm working with right now, and this is one of our big kind of mantras, we'll call it a mantra, even though it doesn't, an affirmation, whatever we want to call it, is really about approaching ourselves with curiosity and compassion.
Yeah.
As a foundation and as a bouncing off point for everything else. If we can stay in a place of curiosity and compassion, then that shifts a lot of the perspectives we have and takes a little pressure off. And for me, at least, does that resonate?
It does, because when you bring up curiosity and compassion, it doesn't feel like I have to, quote, figure it out or make it happen. And I think for me, having that prototypical sort of masculine mindset that has brought me success in business and brought me success as an entrepreneur, it's not applicable to every aspect of life. That sort of, I'm going to make it happen, I'm going to get it done, it's like willing this thing into existence, doesn't really apply to, I think, our healing process or a deep level of self-examination or self-inquiry. You can't force healing. You can't will yourself to be better. That's really, in my opinion, not how it works. There's a surrender involved with healing and self-examination that I think is part and parcel of this curiosity and compassion you're talking about of, oh, I wonder why this thing that I thought was going to fulfill me and make me happy doesn't fulfill me. Like all of these steps that I've taken to have a certain salary or certain income, a certain car, live in a certain zip code, have this certain type of partner or colleagues or friends, whatever the external desire was, it's an inquiry, right? Of not beating ourselves up to say, oh God, I worked for 25 years and I hate my life. And why did I do this? And where do I even go from here? Not this punitive sort of self-immolation where we beat ourselves up for, quote, wasting our time or getting to the top of the mountain. And then we're at the top of the mountain and realize like, oh, is this all there is? It as a sidebar, it reminds me of two things. One of my favorite quotes is from arguably the greatest female tennis player of all time, Martina Navratilova, who once said, the moment of victory is too short to live for that and nothing else. And now that doesn't mean we don't go for our wins, doesn't mean we don't go for our dreams, doesn't mean we don't have aims in our life. But to me, I can think of how many times, Ella, I had this huge thing, just a crazy thing I wanted to accomplish. And I get to that victory, that proverbial top of the mountain. And a week later, well, fades, doesn't it? I'm back to scooping the cat poop and cleaning the dishes and trying to be on the dating apps and live my life and fix the car. And that moment of victory that we spend years or even decades trying to attain, it fades really fast. So what are we actually living for? Are we living to be the best? Are we living to win? Are we constantly being driven to do that? And my question is, well, to what end and why? What are you trying to prove? What are you trying to accomplish? Because those moments of victory, they're fleeting. So in my mind, there's got to be something deeper than that we're pursuing. There's got to be something deeper.
At what point in your life did you realize that there was healing to be had or to be done? Do you know what I mean when you kind of have that realization that you kind of step out of being in it and kind of step out and say, "Oh, look at that. Look at me." And realize that there's a healing journey that you want to take on. At what point did that happen for you?
If I really look back, there were a lot of taps on the shoulder of, hey, you might want to look at this thing because it's not really okay. You're not going to look at it. You're just going to keep pushing forward. Okay, got it. I can look back in retrospect and see that life was trying to give me gentler wake up calls, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
But it really came to a head in the early summer of 2014, where there was a lot of accelerated alarms going off in my life to really take a deeper look at what I was doing. It was a combination of my relationship at that time had ended. I had learned that my TV series on the cooking channel was not going to get renewed for another season. And the book deal that I had originally been offered for my first book, it was a six-figure book deal with the biggest cookbook publisher on the planet, got pulled. And so it was this confluence of huge breakup, TV series getting canceled, book deal getting revoked, and I just literally had a total breakdown. You know, I was planning my suicide, to be just really direct about it, you know, and if I look back on it, at the time I was like, oh, maybe this is just situational depression. Maybe this is just situational suicidal ideation. But if I'm honest about it, there were warning signs about my mental health for many years that I was ignoring prior to that. This was really just the spark that finally lit the fuse, if you will. And I remember thinking, okay, if I don't get help, I'm probably going to kill myself. And I don't really want to kill myself. I just don't want to suffer like this anymore. That was a huge distinction for me that I think was the beginning of the healing process, of making a distinction that I didn't really want to die. I just didn't want to be in that pain anymore. It was so intense and so visceral. And that really started me off on this journey of, what do I do with my mental health? What is the nature of this depression? Am I bipolar? Am I manic depressive? Do I have borderline personality disorder? What's going on with me? And so it's been this 8-year process of really unpacking and trying to understand on a physiological level, a nutritional level, a spiritual level, and a mental level, why do I feel so broken? Why do I feel so depressed? And to be honest, it's been a lot of ups and downs. The healing journey has not been linear by any stretch of the imagination. Sometimes when I feel like I've taken 5 steps forward, I take 3 back. And it's this ebb and flow of trying to get to the root of this pain and this trauma and let go of a lot of the ways, Ella, that I've been motivated in very unhealthy ways throughout my life. And these unhealthy coping mechanisms that really no longer serve me. I want to say this. I think that for anyone who's listening who is examining their mental health, their childhood trauma, trying to heal themselves, or maybe examine these adaptations or these coping mechanisms, it is not for the faint of heart. And I think that's why the people who take this work on, I give them so much respect and credit, because there's really no endpoint. I want to say this. When I first started my mental health journey, it was this idea that if I just eat this thing and take these supplements and work with this therapist and do these shamanic journeys and take these psychedelics and then I'll be, quote, healed. Mm-hmm. I'll never have depression again. I'll never have another suicidal thought. Yes, there'll be a healing destination for me to get to. That is quite the opposite of what I have found. That it is an ongoing inquiry, it's ongoing compassion, it's ongoing curiosity, and the layers of healing. I don't know that there's an end to the healing process, mm-hmm. to be honest with you. I don't think there is an end.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems like you start peeling off some layers, thinking, oh, that might be the last layer. And then you realize, wait a minute, there's not one more layer. Now there's 10 more layers. And then you peel off another layer. And then there's 20 more layers. It's like the layers, they're endless. They are endless. I'm curious what if you had to kind of define holistic health from your perspective, what does that mean to you?
That's a great question. No one's ever asked me this question before. You asked really good questions. I'm biding my time now. I'm delaying so I can formulate an answer.
Yeah, take your time.
Holistic healing.
Or holistic health.
I think it is taking a deep and honest and loving look at all of the dimensions of what it means to be a human being. I think in the wellness industry that we've both been in for a long time, there can be specialists and deep emphasis on nutrition, on diet, on movement, on spirituality, on mental health, on therapy, on trauma work. It can almost feel a little overwhelming at sometimes when you think about the totality of all of the things that make us a human being, from the physical to the non-physical. I think to me, it's a willingness to really examine this idea of not only individuality of, okay, if I'm going to look at movement, food as medicine, getting the right sort of approach to my mental or spiritual healing, certainly finding the right puzzle pieces, because I don't believe that one size fits all. I do believe that there is a commonality with our healing as human beings. Like certainly you and I in our friendship and our personal relationship, how many times in conversation, oh my God, I'm going through something so similar, right? So I think there is this idea of, in some people call it God consciousness, some people call it the noosphere, some people call it unified field theory, that maybe consciousness is this one human mind that we're all having an individual experience, but we share a similar consciousness. I do believe that. But when it comes to holistic healing, I think we have to have an unrelenting desire to experiment and try things and figure out what those individual puzzle pieces are for our life, our work of art called our life. And I mean, I've tried so many different, superfoods and different supplements and gone through 4 different therapists till I found the one that worked for me. I think we have to just be unrelenting in our quest to try things and realize too that, I mean, I've had a few instances of this, Ella, where, okay, I've got my diet, it's dialed in. I've got my supplements dialed in. I've got my therapy and my breath work and my yoga, and it's dialed in. Until it's not dialed in, until we plateau. And maybe the things that we've been doing for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years don't really work the way they used to. So it's that willingness to take that inventory of our lives and say, okay, maybe my approach to holistic health or my collage of healing, it just ain't working anymore. And I've got to switch it up. And then the journey begins again of trying different things. So I don't think that there's an end point of this is the final version of our healing process. We've got to have that willingness to change it up. I think that's a huge part of it.
I agree completely. And I think adding to that is, as we grow and as our, kind of level of consciousness changes and raises, and we discover our blind spots that we didn't know, we can kind of go through similar processes, and it's like we're going through them for the first time. And one example, there's a book called The Presence Process by Michael Brown, and I completed that. It's a 10-week process. And he basically tells you this book is going to be with you for the rest of your life, because once you finish the 10-week process, you take a little break and then you do it all over again, because you're on a different plane of consciousness. And when you read the words, it's going to be like reading them for the first time, because you will understand them on a different level. And it's so powerful and makes so much sense. And it's exciting, because it really does turn this process of life into quite an adventure, if we can get to that place, right? I mean, that's very a very fun way of putting it, but yeah, it's so fascinating. And I think for you, and I'd like to kind of, one of my pet peeves, Jason, is
What
when
is one of
people,
your pet peeves?
one of my pet peeves, and I was about to say it, and I was like, what am I going to say that? It's when somebody asks if they can pick my brain. I want to tell them to F off.
Really?
Yeah, I don't like, it's very invasive to me. It feels very violating. When somebody tells me they want to pick my brain, I'm like, get out of my brain. That's not okay. Anyway, so I'm not going to tell you that, but I am curious because food has been such a important part of your life, and you're such an expert. I think you're so humble, and like, I'm a vegan chef or whatever, but you are so knowledgeable about food on every level. It's way beyond what I have ever studied. So can you talk a little bit about your relationship with food, and that food's relationship with people and mood, and especially on that mental health level?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I've always had a deep love affair with food. I think food to me is simultaneously an art form, a way of creatively expressing ourselves, a mechanism to bring people together in a joyful communion of nourishment and connection. I mean, food to me just represents so many layers of the human experience. It's not just, shoving something in our body for fuel. Yes, it absolutely is fuel. And I think that choosing the right fuel for our bodies is absolutely important. But to me, it's just more soulful than that as well. And growing up, there was always this reverence around food on both sides of my family. And from a young age, I just remember being really little and wanting to be in the kitchen with my grandmothers and my mom and seeing, how are they creating these incredible, beautiful creations? I really wanted to understand the mechanics and the art form of how you create something from scratch. So it's always been a deep love of mine. And I think on another level, Ella, when I decided to transition in the mid 90s from a standard American diet to vegetarian and then vegan, when I started my journey, I was very much trying to find ways that I feel like I could be an effective activist, right? And I started to notice that with my family and my friends, when I would make a really good meal, it wasn't, that's a vegan lasagna, or, oh, is that a plant-based paella? It was just the food was good. That's all they cared about. And I started to recognize that not only, yes, could food be this art form, it could also be a way to open people's minds and hearts to a different way of eating and a different way of living and a different way of caring for their bodies. I saw that very early on. And then I thought, okay, what if I do this as a living? What if I really go to culinary school and figure this out and understand not only the mechanics of how to make good food, but also the functional benefits of what's in the food, right? Not just, oh yeah, great, that's a great burger, great veggie burger, awesome. Like, okay, cool. Did you know there are pumpkin seeds in that burger, which have high levels of zinc, which zinc is very good for our bone health. It's very good for our reproductive organs. It's an essential mineral that we need to use to thrive on, thinking, I want to educate people also about why they should select certain foods and why they should choose certain ingredients to give them some sort of actual direct benefit in their lives. So I geek out on nutrition because I love the food as an art form, but I love letting people know this can help heal and empower your body because it has all of these vitamins and minerals in it. And here's what they do for you. So I took it to another level and started studying nutrition. I'm not a clinical nutritionist, but I feel like I can go toe to toe with many of them.
I know you can. I know you can. And what is the correlation between, and you've got a new online course out, I believe, Good Mood Food?
Yeah, that's with a company called Commune. It's really about optimizing our mood and our mental health through functional plant-based nutrition.
And so what is that correlation between food and mood?
The neurochemicals in our brain are basically action potentials. So something like dopamine is responsible for motivation. Serotonin is responsible for something like feeling good and relaxed and safe in our lives. There's other ones like epinephrine, norepinephrine, 5-HTP. There's hundreds of these neurotransmitters. And what we realize is that through things like probiotics that help to create a more friendly microbiome environment in our gut, that actually is where 95% of our serotonin is created, right? So a lot of people are like, oh, I want to feel better about my life. I want to get out of depression. Well, we know that serotonin is not the only thing. There's actually some studies that came out recently showing that, serotonin is not the only thing responsible for mental health. And we get into the conversation about pharmaceuticals like SSRIs and antidepressants. It's not as simple as we were once taught to believe. So to me, when I think about things like eating an anti-inflammatory diet, eating alkaline food, eating a highly mineralized diet, getting the probiotics in our body from things like coconut yogurt and kefir and fermented vegetables. These are all things that, because they affect our gut brain relationship, they've shown to have a positive effect on our neurotransmitter function. So in this course, I basically show people how to make yogurt from scratch, how to make probiotic foods, how to have a highly mineralized alkaline anti-inflammatory diet that can really help to allay some of those things like oxidative stress and help manage our cortisol levels. We know when we have a high level of stress, we have things like elevated levels of cortisol, elevated levels of adrenaline. And there are things we can eat that can help lower those really deleterious things like cortisol and elevate things like dopamine and serotonin and epinephrine and all those feel-good neurotransmitters. So essentially, it's just a step-by-step course of here's what to eat to feel better. It's not a guarantee, of course, but in my research and what I've done with my body, I know that by tweaking my nutrition and making sure that I understand what the food is doing for my body, I've noticed a pretty dramatic shift in my mental health as well. And I also know that when I have those days where I kind of eat like crap, it absolutely has a direct corollary to my mental health that day.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. I think many people can relate to that as well. And I will say also, kind of on layperson's terms, after speaking especially with Dr. Gabrielle Cousins and Dr. Will Tuttle, just on a spiritual level, they talk about the ingesting of the suffering and partly the physical, the hormones and the cortisol and things like that we're ingesting. But, just kind of on a common sense level, to me, it seems as though, wow, it puts me in a good mood to eat, plants, live, beautiful plants, as opposed to animals that have suffered and died.
Yeah. And the cool thing too, you mentioned Dr. Gabriel Cousins. He was the first person that introduced me to something called Kirlian photography, which is basically where there's a certain kind of camera and you can take a photograph that literally shows the electromagnetic field around certain foods. And there's some really cool side-by-sides. You can actually Google this. It's Kirlian, Kirlian photography, where he will show something like a steak, and next to that, a batch of organic berries. And you can see the energy field coming off of the organic berries is thriving. It's purple, it's white, it's vibrant. And the energy field around something like a piece of steak, which is a chunk of a slaughtered cow, there's almost no energy coming off of it. So yes, we can talk about protein, we can talk about macronutrients, we can talk about micronutrients, all of which are important. But this idea of the energetics that you're bringing up, Ella, the energetics of the food we're eating. We know that things that are dead food, overly cooked food, overly processed food, animal foods have a much lower energetic resonance than something like organic, non-GMO plant-based foods. It's amazing to see this photography. I saw it when I was in culinary school in like 2005, and it absolutely blew my mind. Blew my mind.
That's fascinating. I cannot wait to go look that up. Wow. Wow, wow, wow. Okay. So as we wrap up, Jason, can you share with us about kind of at the moment what your daily habits are, your daily routine with food, meditation, whatever you're doing it currently to keep yourself as whole and healthy as possible?
Yeah, every morning I wake up and the first thing that I do is put a warm compress on my eyes to wake up. Basically do a little bit of breath work, 20-minute meditation with some affirmations and journaling afterward. After I do that, I go and feed all the animals, take my dog Bella for a walk, then feed myself breakfast, get a little movement in. And then that's when I open my computer and look at my, like, I don't actually start work until I am taken care of and my companion animals are taken care of. And I have found that for my mental health and my daily management, if I don't take care of me and take care of my loved ones first, it's kind of a train wreck. So always making sure that my needs and their needs are met, and then we get into work for the day. Definitely make sure that I'm a grazer. I snack throughout the day, eat a bunch of small meals to keep my energy up, my metabolism going throughout the day. At the end of the day, I wrap work. I like to do some reading. I like to do some I've gotten into Qigong recently, which has been really cool. So I've got a little Qigong practice coming in the evenings. And I've been practicing classical guitar. So making sure that my artistic side is nourished, feed myself dinner. And then my evening routine is, like I said, a little more reading, a little more journaling. I say some prayers and some affirmations before I go to bed. And it's really just about me making sure that I have some semblance of a routine that keeps me on track with my healthy habits. Like I have to do that. And I know that for me, it's not something that is a rigid fixed routine. I'll put pieces in and take pieces out. But the journaling, the breath work, the meditation, the movement, the healthy eating, the reading, the music is like every single day I have to have that. Every single day. It nourishes me on a deep soul level. So I think the importance of a morning and an evening routine are something that has helped me tremendously. Yeah. And I make my bed every morning. That's another thing I want. That's also part of my morning. I'm like, no, you make your bed every single day too.
Is your bed, this is a silly question, is your bed against a wall or off a wall? Are you able to walk around the entire bed to make it up?
No. The headboard is actually away from the wall. This is an interesting question. You know what? I don't feel as safe if I have space behind my bed.
Right, but no, I mean on the sides of the bed. Are they?
Oh, on the sides.
Yeah.
Yes, the sides of the bed are open. The space behind the headboard is not. But
okay,
yes, I can walk around the sides and the end of my bed, just not the headboard. Yeah.
I just asked because ever since my bed I've rearranged and it's now against a wall, and making it is so much more annoying. I still do it, but I think I'm gonna have to push it out. Anyway, Jason, this has been so much fun. Oh my gosh, I could talk to you for hours. There's so much that I still want to cover, but I think our time is up. So I really appreciate your time, your insights, your vulnerability, your willingness to share and be so generous with me and the audience. So thank you.
Always good seeing you, Ella. Thanks for having me on.
You bet.